What I would be really grateful to do this afternoon would be for us to think together about how we might engage and consult with the people around us about some ideas I'd like to share with you about refreshing our diocesan vision together. I want to start this afternoon by saying I'm really hoping that I'm not inviting you to a gigantic piece of work which sees you needing to send multiple forms in triplicate, having door knocked your entire parish or school or chaplaincy to elicit the answers. I'm really hoping we can go for a light touch, joyful, conversational way of engaging with this work. So I just think it's really important to say that at the outset. So good to arrive here in the Diocese of Bath and Wells and to encounter the vision of our diocese, living and telling the story of Jesus. And I respond really positively to this overall vision that we have. And I've been saying, as I've been visiting chapters and being present in other places with lay people and schools and in other places around the diocese, I like living and telling the story of Jesus for three reasons. The first is it contains some verbs, and I think that's a really good thing. There's a sense that this is about doing something, not just spectating. I like it because it names the name of Jesus, which it might not necessarily have done so. And I like it as a vision because it's aspirational. I hope by the time I die that I'll be better at living and telling the story of Jesus than I am now. But I'm conscious I've still got a long way to go and a lot further to develop. In terms of our overall vision as a diocese, living and telling the story of Jesus, my strong suggestion is that we should not change this. There is a good reason why, if I say to you the phrase, every little helps, you all identify that as being associated with Tesco's. And the reason for that is that Tesco's have been banging on about that for the last 25 years. So I do feel that it's good for institutions or whoever to stick with their vision over time. And therefore, in my view, living and telling the story of Jesus is not only it's not broke, it don't need fixing. I actually think it's jolly good, and therefore we should stick with it. I must confess, though, when I look at what's below the current vision, I'm not so convinced about its fitness for purpose. The language is often not exactly what I would expect a church warden to use in Chewton Mendip or somewhere like that. I don't often imagine them leaping out at me and talking to me about putting mission and evangelism at the heart of everything we do, for example. And therefore, while the current approaches that the vision has, which I think in plainer English come out as looking outward, mission not maintenance, and everybody having a part to play, while they're all really good, I've got concerns about them for two reasons. The first is the language in which they're currently couched. And the second is that they're all good, but they're all so good that it's really hard to argue with them or really say, well, what difference does this make on the ground? And so I wonder whether something that was a bit more focused, a bit more specific, might help us a great deal. And it's been great for me as I've gone around the diocese. I've now been and met with each of our deanery chapters. I've really appreciated that. I've seen people in lots of other contexts, in parish meetings, with head teachers, meeting with lots of people in lots of different ways. It was great last year to share in all the Zoom meetings about finance that were attended by about 400 people from all over the diocese, treasurers and church wardens and others. It's been great to hear about what people are doing, but it has made me wonder whether it might be good if we could think about a common direction of travel. I've been telling folk that my favorite Zambian proverb, it's taken from a short list of one, so it's not exactly a massive sample. My favorite Zambian proverb is this: when we hoe a field, we all start in one corner and we all go one way. And I think there's real strength for that, for any organization, to have a consistency of what we're all about and the direction we're seeking to head in. Now, of course, I'm going to caveat that immediately by saying that in a diocese as diverse as Bath and Wells, there can't be any one-size-fits-all solutions. What works in Yeovil will be quite different to what works in Weston-super-Mare, to what works in Stokes-upon-Handon, to what works in Frome. We're very, very different contexts, and any vision needs to be able to work with the diversity that we have. I think the second thing I've really experienced as I've been visiting around the diocese is a very strong sense I have that as we think about vision going forward, we must use an approach that's probably termed asset-based. So much of our narrative in our country's life at the moment is a narrative of scarcity. We can't do this because we haven't got that. But I just feel from my life's experience, and I hope from yours too, that beginning with what we don't have is seldom the way to get us anywhere. So I'm really hoping that as we think about a vision, we can start out of a narrative of what we have and not what we lack. So, for example, when I've been visiting deanery chapters, we've been doing Bible studies on John chapter 6 and the feeding of the 5,000, where a resource issue is addressed by starting with what people have, not what they haven't. So, Jesus says, "Where are we to buy bread for all these people to eat?" Philip goes immediately to a story of lack. However many denarii would not be enough to buy each of them a little. But it's Andrew and the little boy who find the solution. There's a boy here, has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they amongst so many? It's an asset-based approach which responds to the issues that they have. As I've said, we can't have a one-size-fits-all. We have to have vision that's capable of being locally owned. And I'm equally convinced it must come from all parts of our diocese, from parishes and schools and chaplaincies, from our lay members, from our readers, from our clergy, from our wardens, from our treasurers, from our diocesan support services, from the synods, from Bishops' Council, heck, maybe from bishops and archdeacons too. So, what's my ask of you today? It's really to invite you to engage in this process about thinking about our vision, and to ask you to have some good, light touch approaches to think about it with the people who are around you too, and in an equally light touch way, please to feed back to us so we can get this right. And so what I'm asking really is for your prayer, for your thinking, for your conversation and consultation, and about the following. Now, let me just, before I dive in, to say what I'd like to lay out before you. I've said that I think we should stick with living and telling the story of Jesus, but I think we need to shape a bit more what comes below that, so it's got some real form and meaning and solidity about things that we can all get behind. My experience is that if I ask people to think about that with a blank sheet of paper, then we get back an extraordinary array of different responses, all of which are very good, but they are so varied and different that almost they can only be experienced as noise. So what I've done is to draft, and I emphasize the word draft, 4 directions of travel that you might think of almost like stakes in the sand about potential ways forward. And like stakes in the sand, I hope they can be picked up, moved around a bit, modified in their shape, maybe discarded altogether so that a different stake can be put in the sand altogether. And what I'd like to do with you now is present the rough areas that I think these 4 themes for areas of developing our vision, what I think they should be. So my starting point for developing our vision, I think we have to start with valuing and cherishing the people we already have, so that we can live out our calling to be light and salt in the communities in which we live. I hate to say it, folks, but I have seen mission approaches suggested in different places, which basically say to the people that they are sent, we kind of wish you were somebody else, or that you weren't here altogether. And that seems to me not only incredibly wasteful, it's verging on the insulting too. As I have gone around the Diocese of Bath and Wells, what I've seen is we have just an extraordinary strength of people and resources that we can bring to living out our diocesan vision. With people with a whole range of skills and abilities and gifts in our churches, in our chaplaincies, in our schools. We're blessed by being held in the trust of our local communities. We have these amazing buildings that people want to see. Even if they're expensive and difficult to run, they're still an asset to us. So I really think that our starting point must be about valuing and cherishing what we already have. And it seems to me that if we had that as our starting point, we could nest underneath that a lot of the stuff that's just really important that we do to attend well to our life together. So, for example, under this area of focus, we could say we really want to value and cherish our church officers. So how do we really train them and support them? We want to value and cherish our clergy and readers and other ministers. So what's our stance on clergy and ministerial well-being? We want to make the best possible use we can of the rich heritage of buildings that we have. So what should a building policy look like for our diocese that makes the very most of all that we've inherited? So that's my first area of focus. The second is this. If we begin by valuing and cherishing the people we've already got, at the same time, it seems to me that we need to recognize that the ways in which our traditional congregations are worshipping doesn't seem to be so attractive to people of younger generations. We used to think that the way to grow churches was to take existing church, make it a bit more attractive or invitational, and expect that new people would come along to our existing offer. I just start to wonder whether actually that's really the way forward in many places. It happens in some places, and hallelujah, praise be when it does. But I think what we're seeing very often is that it's quite a big ask to ask younger people to come and join in the life of one of our traditional congregations. But what we do see is that when we take the substance of our faith and offer it in slightly different forms, then we find that there is an engagement, that people want to come along and find out more. So, for example, we see that with Messy Church or Forest Church or Cafe Church, or any of these new ways of worshipping together that we see, and that when they're offered, people who would never come to our traditional Sunday morning offering want to get involved. And I talk to people and they say, yeah, we did something slightly different, and all these people came out of the woodwork who we'd never met before. So I wonder whether offering that kind of church needs to become just part of our day-to-day life if we're going to touch new generations. That's my second area of focus. And the third concerns how we do ministry. Because of course, when the church began, it's clear if you read a letter like Ephesians or Corinthians, that the expectation was that the ministry of any church would be taken forward by a wide variety of different people, drawing on a whole series of different giftings. So in Ephesians, it says, some are prophets, some teachers, some evangelists, some so on and so forth. Whereas I think very often what we've ended up with is a Victorian model of church, which basically has an assumption that there will be one vicar in one parish with one church building, and that the vicar will do most of the ministry. And not only does that seem to me to be a crying waste of the talents of a whole range of different people who are present in parishes, but also as we have less clergy covering more places, it's really not a way forward for us at all. The image I've got, if you think of a clergy person as a pat of butter, they used to be asked to cover 1 or 2 pieces of toast. Now they're often being asked to cover 5 or 6. And that's just a recipe for burnout. And I think we need to find a much better way of drawing on the giftings of lots of different people. I think intrinsically because it's the right thing to do, but also very practically because I don't think that really the way we do ministry now is a long-term solution that we have. That's my third area of focus. And the final one is around faith development. I've been really impressed as I've gone around the diocese to see with lots of different people, so lay leaders of new worshiping communities or clergy or readers or young people's leaders. We have lots and lots of really good ways of saying to folk, why don't you come and put your toes into the water of faith? Come and see what it's like. Try it out. Help us learn from you as you do that. But it seems to me, I don't sense as many ways of saying to folk, once they've put their toes in the water, maybe you'd like to try coming ankle deep with us, or maybe knee deep with us, and find out what it's like. So I guess my fourth area of focus would be to ask, how together are we helping people keep on growing in the faith? If faith is a journey for the whole of our lives, then if I say to you, come on a journey and we're going to go and sit in the terminus at King's Cross, it's not a very interesting journey to go on. If I say to you, let's get the train up to the Isle of Skye to Mallaig, what a journey that can be. How are we inviting people onto a journey that gets deeper, broader, wider, more exciting as it goes on? And I do think that should be one of our areas of focus. So those are my 4 areas that I'm proposing, that are in draft, that are there to be interrogated and improved and critiqued and argued with, and hopefully made one heck of a lot better. And what I'd like to ask of you in the places where you are is, would it be possible for you to have some conversations with the people around you about the 4 areas that I've suggested? And then please, might you be able to feed back on what you've found out during those conversations? As I say, I hope it would not be a massively heavy task to ask you to do that. I'm not thinking that we need to hold major symposiums about this. I'm thinking more about having conversations at the back of church over coffee kind of conversations, and of just weaving this into the warp and weft of our everyday life. To help give some structure to what we're asking, we're going to be sending out next week a little feedback link. So this is what the front page of it's going to look like. It's inviting people to give their feedback. And then for each of the 4 areas, what we'd like to propose is, could you have conversations about 2 questions? So for example, about valuing and cherishing the people we already have. Could you have a conversation which said something like, what does this look like where we are right now? What stories of encouragement or challenge would we tell? That would be the first question. And the second is, if we were thinking a bit further ahead, say in the next 2 to 4 years, what would it really look like for people to feel that they were being valued and cherished where we are? So what would good look like, or what would success look like, or what would input look like in this area? And then what we've done in the feedback is to say, could those 2 questions be asked for each of the 4 areas? The valuing and cherishing the people we've already got, thinking about new worshiping communities, about sharing local ministry, and about developing faith. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to go into breakout rooms. And what I'd like to ask you is these 2 questions. How do you think you might go about having this kind of conversation in a non-onerous fashion where you are? And do you have any questions or particular concerns? We're going to go to breakout rooms for 15 minutes to think about that. And then we'll come back into plenary. And if each group could nominate a person to speak on their behalf, we'd just like a quick summary back of what's been said, and also to ask that person to pop those thoughts into the chat. And then by the time we've done that, it'll be time for the end of our meeting. But so these are the 2 questions. But then just let me give you a flavor of what's come out. We've done 2 other of these sessions, so we've been kept on updating what we've been saying. Here's just some ideas as a taster to get you started of what people have said about how they think these ideas could be shared. Maybe they could be discussed during the sermon slot or after a service. If you have home groups, could home groups be asked to think about these themes at one of their meetings? Do you go into schools? Could you get a group of Year 6 children to discuss what they think about this? If that's so, Tony and the Go team have got resources to help you do that. The same for chaplaincy. Mike Haslam's got ideas. Julia and the team will be offering some online opportunities to feedback in due course. And yesterday, Andrew, who's area dean over in the Locking Deanery, said, be very good if this could be done over some food. So we put that down as another response as well.